Hey, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
What's your name?
Jess
Jess?
Csanky.
I see you have this man here. Who is he?
That's my fiance Kunal.
Nice to meet you, Kamal.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, this is all wonderful here.
Thank you.
So whose art is this, by the way?
This one is mine. It's one of my favorite pieces.
Okay.
I don't always hang my own art, but this is one that I've chosen to.
Are you most proud of it, or why do you think it's...
One of my favorites?
Yeah.
It just has a lot of meaning to me, and so I like to keep it here as a reminder of what would motivate me to keep working and striving towards, or using it as like a point to keep going forward.
Do you, when you do this type of art, do you plan it ahead, or is it just all feelings, like whatever comes out?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination. I would say that I usually have a feeling or an overall state that I want to present in mind. And when I start building a piece of art, I'll be pretty spontaneous about it and even intuitive. But once it starts developing, I use the actual brush strokes or line work or even organic patterns in there to build upon it as a roadmap. So this type of painting or project I actually came upon through experimentation, and what I've done here is used cutouts as a way to build more composition into the piece. And so every time that I cut something away, I put it back into the piece, and it represents life in that way, and how every time you have setbacks or losses, they become part of the beautiful picture of life. And so this is probably one of my more personal works that I've done, and yeah, that's a little bit about the background.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, come off with me.
Okay.
And this is your workspace, right?
This is my current workspace.
Nice.
I recently moved out of my art studio, and we decided to use what we have in the best way possible. So this dining room is now my studio presently. So basically this wall here is what I use to create larger works.
Right.
And this is a recent piece. I think it's actually at a place where it's pretty much finished. I've learned over time that I like to take a pause a little bit and not overwork things, because my tendency when I started painting was to like fill up every tiny inch of space. But this one I feel like is breathing, and I'm trying to incorporate that space into my canvases. Yeah.
So like, so instead of asking how do you know a work is finished, how do you know when to pause? Like after all these years, it sounds like you've developed some way of like, all right, I'm doing too much. When do you know you're doing too much?
I think the work itself will tell you. I try to like get into a flow state basically when I'm painting and listen to the moment. I think that the painting will tell me if it wants to be finished by, I guess, how I feel when I look at it.
So when you see it, it pretty much communicates to you like, hey, like take a pause.
Yeah.
We may be getting close.
Yeah. Actually, this painting as it is now, I love it this way. But a few weeks ago when I started it, I was feeling really experimental, and my craft is acrylic really, so I feel like I have a good handle on that medium. But I wanted to try adding oil stick into this piece, and it was pretty much like this, finished. And I went in there and I did like a really big oil stick experiment, and it was kind of a disaster actually. So it was kind of a funny process to go in there and realize that I wanted to get it back to where it was. And you can't always do that. But with this piece, I found a way to use tools to basically remove what I had done and get it back to where it was. So just through making mistakes in the process too, you can learn a lot about what's working and what isn't working. But you have to be willing to like kind of take a risk sometimes with a piece that is at that sweet spot, and see if you can live with it.
Yeah. Well, it also, I think, plays more with what you're saying about the shapes, reusing things, experimenting, but then it becomes what it should be. Mm-hmm. So that's really cool.
Thank you.
What about this piece right here?
So this piece echoes kind of like the colors of the larger canvas a little bit. But I created this after a recent trip to India with Kunal. I went with his family, and when I came back, I was really inspired by the colors there and the views and countrysides that we drove through. So in this piece, I tried to incorporate some more landscape elements. And actually, if you look at it, you can see that there's sort of a door frame that was there. All over India are extremely beautiful door frames. And so this one, I've started to like break that boundary a little bit, like the hard line, and make it a little bit hazy, sort of like a memory. A landscape within a memory, and how like our minds are sort of, I guess, emotional, psychological landscapes at times. I love working with memory when I paint and when I create art. So that's a little bit about the backstory here.
So if you don't mind me asking, now that you're saying memory, you know, using bits and shapes and reusing them, like, are there things in your life that maybe you've lost? It doesn't even have to be family or friends, like things that you've lost that you've kind of brought back into your life and art.
Yeah. Well, I will just share that when I was 19, my mom passed away, and I was really close to her. She was also an artist. And so a lot of my reason for creating art was a way to connect to my inner self and process loss or healing. And so when I created a way for me to channel my feelings or processing was through like imagining spaces or places or memories, and like kind of expressing what that would feel like, or acknowledging how beautiful life can be even with the challenges that exist. And even some of my best moments of life have happened after that really hard period of my life, but always the loss is still there. And so I think a lot of the work is just about acknowledging the beauty of life and looking for it, but knowing that those moments which are challenging are part of that bigger picture. And I think I don't talk a lot about the meaning behind it all the time, but over the years I've come to realize that art is both like a self-healing place and a joyful place. So, and it can be challenging too. Like there are days when I really don't want to pick up a brush, but at the end of the day, I keep coming back to it. So
yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's very thoughtful of you.
Thank you for asking. It's a little bit more of like a deeper story behind what's going on, but and that is part of it. I'm sure there's a ton
more that you could share. But maybe before we move on to the next question, like, would you say that was the toughest thing you've dealt with as an artist in the art world, or have there been other things that's like, no, because you know what you went through sounded very tough, but also you learned a lot and you grew. But are there other things that it's like, oh no, that was just art world specifically, that was tough and annoying, and I hated that?
I would say even though I went through that and came out the other side of the grief, the hardest thing I think with art is just like the judgment that you might put on it as an artist, like how will this be received, and what am I saying and sharing. And so I think I wouldn't say that the art world specifically has imposed any challenges to me. It's more been about my own hoping that this, you know, has an important place somewhere. Yes. And so I think it's funny because it's not like what I went through in that sense, but every day when you create, like some days are good and some days you hope that it will be like, it will have significance, that the art will have some significance to someone, even if it's just a person seeing it in an exhibition and loving it, or a coffee shop, hoping that it will get through to somebody and talk to them in a way that excites them.
That makes sense.
Or intrigues.
So, next, feel free to bash the art world if you want. but are there any things you wish the art world could change in or could become in the future?
That's such a good question. I have an interesting relationship with the art world because I've worked in it for a long time as well.
Yeah.
And worked with a gallery that I love very much. But I do hope that artists from many backgrounds, many levels of education, many levels of practice feel included in what art is, and that the art world builds community for people and is a place for artists and art appreciators to come together and feel good about what they're doing and saying in the world.
Yeah, that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
And so wrapping up, do you feel like more people can become artists if they just converted maybe their living room to an art studio?
Yeah.
Any advice on like how to convert your space into an art space too?
I would say you don't have to have a big grand studio to be an artist.
You don't have to be rich.
Right? You can have a desk, you can have a computer, you can have a pad of paper, write poetry, find a place that can be comfortable for you and create art, because art is for everyone. And I think truly everybody has a lot of creativity within them, and I think it's really worth people giving themselves like permission to express that, like giving themselves that credibility of, hey, I'm creative, I can tap into that, let me get to work, even if it's just in the living room or in a fabulous studio.
Exactly. The last thing I'll say is I personally think you're very well organized and you're set up for success.
Thank you.
But I don't think that's a requirement, or maybe it is for an artist, but I saw that right away and I want to commend you for that too.
Oh, thank you. Actually, a little hobby of mine is organizing. It really makes me feel excited to get to work when I can see my tools and my paints and what I have to work with available. So like as part of my artistic process, sometimes just like organizing the studio is an important thing, so that when I do sit down, it's just an arm reach away to get material that could get me excited about painting or drawing.
All right.
Yeah, I recently got into lino cut prints. A friend of mine who's an artist said it's a really fun way to experiment with hand printing, and so I did go over to the art store and picked up a linoleum slab and just like experimented with it, and it turned out okay. I made this sort of mandala flower, and it was fun for me to try something new and realize that some areas of creativity which I haven't tried are, not impossible if you just put your mind to it.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice, and I'll leave it there.
Thanks.
It was great to meet you.
Great to meet you too.